When my daughter told me to my face, with cold indifference, that I should find another place to die, that now my husband Robert was gone I was utterly useless, I felt an icy grip clench my heart. But contrary to all expectation, I didn't pack my bags with the usual obedience I had shown my family for 44 years, but with a slowly stirring resolve. 3 days later, in a law office that smelled of old leather and unspoken secrets, I discovered the staggering truth. My supposedly loving husband had been playing a chess game of epic proportions, its final moves only now becoming visible after his death. Victoria, my daughter, was about to learn that in this game, sometimes the most unassuming pawn is promoted to an unstoppable queen. If you're watching this, my dear listeners, please subscribe to my channel and let me know where you're following this story from. I'm going to tell you how I, Mabel Summers, went from a homeless widow to a woman holding all the cards, whose life's melody is no longer composed by others. Because my dears, this story has more twists than a pretzel factory on a busy Saturday. Just 2 short months ago, I was merely Mabel Summers, a woman who had spent 44 years of her life as a devoted wife and the mother of what would turn out to be a spectacularly ungrateful daughter. When Robert, my husband, died unexpectedly of a heart attack at 71, I felt my world collapse around me. Every breath seemed to steal the air from my lungs, every memory a stab to the heart. But Victoria, my only daughter, descended upon my grief like a vulture in designer clothes swooping in on its prey. She loudly lamented how terribly difficult this must be for me. "Mom, you can't possibly manage this big house all by yourself," she had said, her voice dripping with such obviously false concern that it should have alerted me even then. The endless stairs, the demanding upkeep, all these painful memories. It's just not healthy for you. I should have seen the ice-cold calculation behind her feigned worry. Robert had always adored Victoria. She was his little princess who could do no wrong in his eyes. When she married the dazzling investment banker, Frederick, and gave him 2 delightful grandchildren, Robert showered them all with extravagant generosity and affection. Meanwhile, I was just the woman in the background, who patiently cooked, cleaned, managed the household, and ensured everything ran smoothly, without ever being truly seen. After Robert's funeral, Victoria's insistence regarding my situation grew more persistent and aggressive. She brought Frederick to our family dinners, where they would corner me with glossy prospectuses for senior living communities and brochures for retirement homes. "Mom, these places are just wonderful. You'd have company your own age, countless activities, and no responsibilities at all." What they really meant was no inheritance to split and no inconvenient mother to deal with. They tried to convince me this was my wish, that I would enjoy the freedom. But in their eyes, I saw only the greed hiding behind a veil of concern. I felt like a piece of furniture you could just throw away. The final, devastating blow came on a fateful Tuesday. I had been living for 6 weeks after Robert's death in what Victoria now referred to with remarkable ease as our house. I was still sleeping in the guest room, unable to bear tidying our shared bedroom where every corner held a painful memory. Victoria showed up unannounced, accompanied by Frederick and 2 large, empty suitcases. "Mom, we've made an important decision. Frederick got that long-awaited promotion, and we have to move to the city immediately. This house is just perfect for us, far too big for you alone." I stared at her, my mind refusing to grasp the full implication of her words. "Move? But this is my home." Victoria's carefully maintained mask of kindness slipped for a brief, terrifying moment, revealing the cold, calculating woman lurking beneath. "Actually, Mom, according to Dad's will, I inherited everything. The house, the extensive investments, literally everything. I've been letting you stay here out of the kindness of my heart, but it's really time for you to find a place of your own."
The words hit me like a physical blow. A punch that stole my breath and sent my world reeling.
"Victoria, that must be a terrible mistake."
"No mistake, Mom.
Dad knew perfectly well that I would take better care of his legacy than you ever could. You never understood anything about money or complex investments. You were always just the wife. Just the wife. 44 years of my life, my love, my sacrifice, reduced to those 3 condescending words. Then she delivered the death blow that was meant to bring me to my knees for good.
"Find another place to die. You're useless now."
I packed up my entire existence in a single day. 44 years of marriage, a whole life, fit into 2 small suitcases and a modest box of photos that stood as silent witnesses to my past. Victoria watched from the doorway, her eyes impatiently glancing at her watch, as if I were making her late for something more important. "There's a very nice retirement community on Maple Street," she offered with the same enthusiasm one might use to recommend a decent restaurant. "Very affordable, Mom. I'm sure they have vacancies." Affordable. My daughter, who had just inherited $35 million, was suggesting I move into some kind of home for the needy. Frederick loaded my suitcases into their gleaming BMW with the efficiency of a waste disposal worker. "Mabel, you'll love having your independence back," he said, avoiding my gaze. His words sounded hollow and forced. No more worries about home maintenance or those pesky property taxes. No more home, is what he really meant, and the realization hit me with full force. As we drove away, I watched my house, Robert's house, now Victoria's house, disappear in the rearview mirror, a small dot on the horizon that represented my entire life. The irony did not escape me. I had spent 4 decades turning that house into a loving home, organizing Victoria's birthday parties, nursing Robert through his illnesses, tending to every detail that was important to him with the utmost care. Now, I was being driven to a cheap motel like an unwanted guest who had overstayed their welcome. The Sunset Motel was exactly what you'd expect from a place that charged $59 a night. Thin walls, even thinner towels that were past their prime, and a carpet that had seen better decades. Victoria pressed $200 in cash into my hand as if tipping a hotel maid. Her touch was brief and distant. "This should be enough for a few days while you get settled," she said casually. "I'll have Frederick transfer some money to your account once we get Dad's paperwork sorted." Some money. From my own, rightful inheritance. The mockery was unbearable. After they left, I sat on the sagging mattress that felt like a descent into insignificance and tried to process what had just happened. In the span of just 3 hours, I had gone from a grieving widow to a homeless senior. The woman I had raised, loved unconditionally, and made countless sacrifices for had thrown me away like an expired prescription. A profound sense of helplessness and despair washed over me. But as I sat there in that depressing motel room, which smelled of stale smoke and unfulfilled dreams, something began to bother me, a quiet feeling that slowly grew inside me. Robert had always been meticulous in his affairs, obsessively organized when it came to important documents. He had shown me the will years ago, explained his wishes in detail, ensuring I understood every clause, and I was absolutely certain it wasn't what he had told me back then. Robert had been many things: traditional, sometimes stubborn, occasionally condescending about money matters, but he had never been cruel. The man who had held my hand when my mother died, who had surprised me with flowers on every anniversary, would not have left me destitute. This had to be a mistake, a terrible mix-up. The next morning, with a sense of urgency that overrode my exhaustion, I used the motel's spotty Wi-Fi to look up Robert's attorney, Mr. Albert Schneider. He was the same lawyer who had handled our house purchase and various business matters over the years. His office was downtown, a 20-minute bus ride that cost me precious cash but felt absolutely necessary. I entered the distinguished office, which exuded an aura of seriousness and discretion. Mr. Albert Schneider was a distinguished man in his 60s with kind but sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When his secretary announced that Mrs. Summers was here about her husband's estate, he looked genuinely surprised, almost irritated. "Mabel, my dear, I was wondering when you would finally stop by. I've tried calling your house several times, but Victoria said you were on an extended trip." On a trip? The audacity of my daughter was breathtaking. "Mr. Schneider, there was a reading of the will?" "Mabel, you absolutely should have been there. Victoria said you were too distraught to attend and that she would handle everything and ensure you received your rightful inheritance." The blood drained from my face as the cruel reality hit me with full force. "Mr. Schneider, I was never told about any reading. Victoria told me she inherited everything. She threw me out of my own house." Mr. Albert Schneider's expression shifted from confusion to sheer alarm. His eyebrows furrowed in concern. He reached for a thick file on his desk, his movements suddenly urgent and decisive. "Mabel, that's absolutely impossible. Your husband's will is very specific about your inheritance. It leaves no room for misinterpretation. He pulled out a carefully folded document. I recognized Robert's neat, unmistakable signature at the bottom. Certified and notarized, unassailable. But as Mr. Schneider began to read, it became clear with every line that Victoria had lied about everything. Every word she had told me had been a carefully constructed illusion. I, Robert Jacob Summers, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Mabel and Summers, the following: our primary residence at Oakwood Drive, including all furniture and personal effects. Additionally, I bequeath to her 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, which amount to approximately $25 million. I felt dizzy, the numbers dancing before my eyes.
$25 million, the house, 70% of everything.
I was rich, and Victoria had tried to take it all from me. Mr. Schneider continued reading, his voice growing stern, his words echoing in the room. To my daughter, Victoria Summers Monroe, I bequeath $10 million, to be held in a trust fund, with disbursements to begin on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her treatment of her mother after my death. Contingent upon her treatment of me. Robert had known. Somehow, he had known exactly what Victoria would try to do. He had anticipated her greed and selfishness. Mr. Schneider, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. Victoria told me I inherited nothing. She moved into my house. She gave me $200 and suggested I look for a retirement home. The elderly lawyer flushed with anger. His hands clenched into fists. Mabel, what Victoria has done is called elder abuse and fraud. She has committed several serious felonies. This is no minor offense. But she had legal documents. She showed me papers she said she got from you. Forgeries, most likely. Or documents from an earlier draft that was never executed. Your husband updated his will 6 months before he passed, specifically because he was concerned about Victoria's attitude toward money and her inflated sense of entitlement. The room was spinning, my thoughts racing. All those times Victoria had dismissed my opinions, talked over me at family dinners, rolled her eyes when I tried to contribute to conversations about her expensive vacations or Frederick's business successes. Robert had been watching, assessing, making decisions that were now protecting me. There's more, Mabel, and this is the crucial part. The trust provision for Victoria explicitly states that if she fails to treat you with respect and dignity after my death, the entire $10 million will revert to you instead. I stared at him, stunned. The words slowly formed into a coherent thought in my mind. Are you saying my daughter just cost herself $10 million? Her inheritance now belongs to me, too. You don't inherit $25 million, Mabel. You inherit $35 million, plus the house and all personal effects. The irony was so perfect, so wickedly delicious, it was almost funny. Victoria had been so eager to claim her supposed inheritance that she had triggered the very clause designed to protect me from her greed. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely steady. A feeling of incredible vindication was mixing with the shock. Mr. Schneider smiled, and for the first time since Robert's death, I saw genuine warmth directed at me, not at the dutiful wife. Now, my dear, he said, we call the police about the fraud. And then we call Victoria and inform her that she's about to get the shock of her life. Can she fight this? She'll get a lawyer. With what money? She's about to discover that every account she thought she controlled actually belongs to you. Every investment, every bank account, every asset besides her own home is about to be frozen pending the investigation into her fraudulent activities. I thought of Victoria in my house, probably already planning renovations, buying new furniture with money she thought was hers. Frederick was likely calculating how the inheritance would impact his investment portfolio. They had no idea that in about 6 hours, their entire world was going to implode. This was the beginning of my revenge. Mr. Albert Schneider's elegant office transformed into the command center for what he cheerfully dubbed Operation Justice. He immediately contacted the police, the banks, and a seasoned private investigator, while I sat in his comfortable leather chair, still processing the breathtaking scope of Victoria's deception. The revelation was monumental, and I felt as if I were navigating a completely new landscape. The forged documents are quite sophisticated, explained Detective Frances Miller, a woman with a sharp gaze and an incorruptible sense of justice, as she examined the fake will Victoria had shown me. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime, Mrs. Summers. Someone planned this carefully and with criminal intent. Do you think Victoria had help? I asked, a sick feeling dawning on me. Almost certainly. Creating convincing legal forgeries requires specific knowledge and the right connections. We'll need to investigate whether Frederick or someone in his financial network was involved. Within just 2 hours, all the accounts were frozen. Victoria's credit cards, linked to what she believed were her new, lavish inheritance accounts, were declined. The house deed, which she had already transferred into her name, was locked pending an ownership review. The net was tightening. My phone rang at exactly 3:47 p.m. Victoria's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by a jolt of vindictive pleasure. I answered the call.
Mom, where are you?
There's some kind of mix-up with the bank accounts. They're saying Dad's assets are frozen. This is absurd. I allowed myself a moment of silence before responding.
Hello, Victoria. I'm sitting in Mr. Albert Schneider's office.
You remember him, don't you? Dad's lawyer, the one who read the real will in an empty room while you were telling him I was on a trip.
Sie längse on the other end of the line, sie längse zet spoke ludatan tusand words.
Then, a trembling voice. Mom, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I've discovered that you're a liar and a thief, darling. I've also discovered that your father was a lot smarter than either of us thought. You don't understand, Mom. I was just trying to protect you from the complexity of managing all that money. You've never had to deal with investments. You wouldn't know the first thing about it, would you? I understand perfectly, Victoria. You forged legal documents, committed fraud, and threw your 67-year-old mother out of her own home because you thought I was too stupid to notice. Her voice turned sharp, desperate, a hint of panic creeping in.
Mom, you're confused.
The grief has been overwhelming, and someone is clearly taking advantage of your emotional state. The audacity was stunning. Even caught red-handed, Victoria was trying to manipulate me. Victoria, darling, let me make something very clear to you. Not only did you never inherit anything, but your actual inheritance, the $10 million your father left you, now belongs to me, thanks to a beautiful little clause he included about being treated with dignity and respect. Remember that. Silence again, then a disbelieving whisper.
That's impossible.
Detective Frances Miller is sitting right here if you'd like to discuss the impossibility of fraud charges with her. The line went dead, this time for longer. I could almost hear Victoria's mind racing, calculating, searching for a final advantage, a loophole. Mom, please, can we meet somewhere and talk about this reasonably? I'm sure we can work something out that suits all of us. Oh, we'll definitely be meeting soon, Victoria. At the courthouse, when you're arraigned. You can present all your excuses there. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. I'm your flesh and blood. Something cold and final crystallized in my chest, a resolve I never knew I possessed. Watch me. I hung up and looked at Mr. Schneider, who was beaming with approval. How long before she's arrested? Detective Miller has enough evidence for a warrant. They'll pick her up tonight. And Frederick, his financial records are being subpoenaed. If he was involved in creating those documents, he'll be charged as well. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Mom, please don't do this. Think of the grandchildren. What will they think? I showed the message to Detective Miller, who smiled grimly.
Emotional Manipulation, Mrs. Sommers.
A classic pattern in this type of crime.
I typet back.
I am thinking of them. And they deserve to see what happens when you steal from your own family. 20 minutes later, Frederick called. Mabel, surely we can resolve this privately. Victoria made some poor decisions, but involving the police seems excessive. It's just going to hurt everyone. Frederick, did you help her forge those documents? That's not. Mabel, you have to understand the pressure Victoria was under. She was worried about your state of mind, your ability to handle large sums of money. So that's a yes. And it wasn't malicious? She really thought she was protecting me by kicking me out of my house and telling me to find a place to die. Frederick was silent. I could practically feel his desperation. Frederick, here's how this is going to go. You will both be arrested. You will both be charged with federal fraud. And I will be sitting in my house, watching it all unfold. Mabel, please be reasonable. There's still a way. I was reasonable for 44 years, Frederick. It didn't pay off very well for me. This time, I'm playing by my rules. The police arrested Victoria at 8:30 p.m., as she was having dinner at the Gilded Stag, apparently celebrating her inheritance with Frederick and another couple, oblivious to the net tightening around them. According to Detective Miller, she screamed about false arrest and demanded to call her lawyer, who turned out to be Frederick's golfing buddy and had zero experience in criminal law. A farce. Frederick was arrested the next morning in his office while trying to shred key documents. The forensic accountant had traced the forged documents to a print shop Frederick's firm used to create fraudulent investment prospectuses. Apparently, my son-in-law had quite the criminal history, which Victoria either didn't know about or, more likely, willfully ignored. I spent my first night back in my home in 44 years sleeping in the master bedroom. It was a strange feeling, almost surreal. Victoria had already moved her things into the room, replacing Robert's meticulous order with her chaos of designer clothes, expensive cosmetics, and carelessly discarded receipts. I packed everything into large trash bags with a remarkable sense of calm and put them on the porch. She could pick them up when she made bail.
The house felt different now.
Not just because Robert was gone, but because I finally saw it as mine, a space that belonged only to me. For decades, I had curated it as Robert's sanctuary, designed around his preferences, his needs, his vision of how we should live. Now, looking around with clear eyes, I realized how little of me had ever been reflected in these rooms. That was about to change. I would breathe my own vision, my own dreams, into these walls. Mr. Schneider called around noon with more news. Victoria's bail is set at $50,000. Since all her accounts are frozen, she'll have to find someone else to pay it. Her in-laws, perhaps.
What about Frederick? $250,000.
Apparently, the judge was not impressed with his history of financial crimes. He had a history. Who knew your son-in-law had been investigated for securities fraud? I certainly didn't, but then again, I was excluded from most of the family's financial discussions. Victoria and Frederick had always spoken to me as if I were a child when it came to money, simplifying concepts I supposedly couldn't understand. They were about to learn just how much I actually understood, and it was going to cost them dearly. Mr. Schneider, I want to make some changes to the house. Victoria had contractors on standby for renovations. I'd like to move forward with some of those plans, but with my own vision, my own style.
Excellent idea, Mabel.
It's your home now. Do what makes you happy, what nourishes your soul. What made me happy, I realized, was the thought of undoing every assumption Victoria had made about my inheritance. She had planned to gut the kitchen, replace the fine hardwood floors, and turn Robert's study into a gaudy wine cellar. I would turn the study into a light-filled art studio and the wine cellar plans into a library, a place of quiet and knowledge.
My phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Sommers?
This is Hazel Koch from Channel 7 News. We understand you're the victim in a significant elder fraud case involving your daughter. Would you be willing to share your story? The public has a right to know. Word was getting out. In a city this size, the arrest of a prominent investment banker and his wife for defrauding his mother-in-law was top-tier news. Ms. Koch, I appreciate your interest, but I'm not prepared to make any public statements at this time. The situation is still too raw. I understand this must be difficult, Mrs. Summers, but your story could help other seniors recognize the warning signs of financial abuse within their families. Your voice could protect a lot of people. She was right. How many other women my age were being manipulated by adult children who saw them as inconvenient obstacles to an inheritance? If I decide to tell my story, would I have full control over how it's presented? I don't want it twisted or sensationalized. Absolutely, Mrs. Summers. We could arrange an in-depth interview, where you would have final approval on the edit. You would have the last word. I thought of Victoria, likely sitting in a cold holding cell, still believing this was all a misunderstanding she could manipulate her way out of. Miss Coke, I'll get back to you. I may have quite a story to tell. One that needs to be heard. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine Frederick had sent us for Christmas. Wine that, I now realized, I was buying in my own house, with my own rightfully acquired money, while I contemplated whether or not to publicly humiliate my daughter on television. Life had certainly taken an unexpectedly interesting turn. A turn that was giving me a new kind of strength. The doorbell rang at 7 a.m. sharp with a vehemence that shattered my peaceful morning mood. Through the window, I saw Victoria on my porch, in yesterday's clothes, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared. She looked as though she had aged 5 years overnight. Every trace of her former elegance was gone. Somehow, she had made bail, likely thanks to her in-laws or a desperate friend. I opened the door but did not invite her in. The threshold remained a barrier she could not cross. "Mom, please, we need to talk. It's all a huge misunderstanding." Her voice was brittle, pleading.
Wie talked yesterday, Victoria?
"You told me to find another place to die. I found a place to live instead, and a new purpose." Victoria's eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. Her usually perfect composure was completely shattered, like a broken porcelain doll. "I made mistakes, Mom, horrible mistakes. But I'm still your daughter, your only child."
Are you?
Because daughters don't typically forge legal documents to steal their mother's inheritance and throw her out of the house. "I wasn't stealing, Mom. I was." She stopped, visibly struggling to find words that didn't sound criminal, that would cast her actions in a better light.
"You were what, Victoria? Say it."
"You were trying to protect me from making bad financial decisions. You've never managed large sums of money. You would have squandered it all." Even now, even after being arrested for fraud, she couldn't admit the truth. In Victoria's mind, she was still the victim of my unreasonable expectations, the hero of her own twisted story. "Victoria, let me tell you something your father told me 6 months before he died. He said he was worried about your inflated sense of entitlement, your attitude toward money, and how you treat people you consider beneath you. He saw you more clearly than you thought." Her face went ashen, all the color draining from it. "Dad never said that. That's a lie, a vicious insinuation. He said you reminded him of his sister, Eleanor. Beautiful, charming, and utterly incapable of thinking about anyone but herself. He told me he was changing the will precisely because he was afraid of what you would do to me if you had control of his estate." "That is an outrageous lie, Mom." I pulled out my phone and showed her a voice recording icon. "Actually, it's not. Your father recorded a video message explaining his decision, to be played in the event you ever contested the will or treated me poorly after his death." Victoria stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake, poised to strike.
"Hey, darling.
He knew exactly who you were under all that charm and polish. The only thing he didn't predict was just how far you would actually go." "Play it," she whispered, her voice barely audible.
I touched the screen, and Robert's voice filled the peaceful morning air.
Clear, measured, and absolutely devastating. "If you are hearing this, Victoria, it means my fears about your character were justified. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped my daughter had more integrity than I suspected. But if Mabel is playing this recording, it means you have proven me right in the worst possible way." Victoria sank onto the porch steps as Robert's voice continued, relentless. "I watched for 44 years as your mother sacrificed her dreams, her ambitions, her independence, to care for our family. She took part-time jobs to help fund your college education while I was building my business. She put her own education on hold, passed up career opportunities, and focused on being the wife and mother you demanded she be."
The recording lasted another 3 minutes.
Every word carefully chosen, every pause strategically placed. Each sentence was a scalpel, slicing through Victoria's justifications and self-delusions, exposing her true nature without mercy. By the time you hear this, you will have discovered that your poor treatment of your mother has cost you everything.
I hope it was worth it.
When it ended, Victoria was crying. Not the pretty, controlled tears she had used to manipulate people since childhood, but ugly, broken sobs that came from a place of utter despair. "He hated me," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "No, Victoria. He loved you enough to hope you would prove him wrong. You chose to prove him right instead." She looked up at me, mascara streaking her cheeks. "What happens now, Mom? What's going to become of me?" "Now, you face the consequences of your choices. The fraud charges, the investigation, the public humiliation. When this story hits the news, that is your legacy." The news. Victoria's face crumpled completely, etched with panic and desperation. "Mom, please, think about what this will do to the grandchildren, to Frederick's career, to our entire family. You're destroying everything." "I am thinking about that, Victoria. I'm thinking about how you didn't consider any of those things when you decided to commit multiple felonies to rob your own mother." She stood up slowly, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen her. "A broken woman. I know you won't believe this, Mom, but I never wanted it to come to this. I just wanted the money. I wanted the security, the status. I never wanted to worry again. I was so scared." For the first time since this nightmare began, Victoria was telling the truth. A raw, unvarnished confession.
"I believe you, darling.
But wanting something doesn't justify destroying people to get it. That's not an excuse for your actions." She nodded, tears still flowing, her shoulders heaving. "What can I do to fix this, Mom? Is there any way?" "You can start by admitting that what you did was wrong. Not misguided, not protective, not complicated, but wrong. It was wrong. It was completely, inexcusably wrong. And then you can face whatever consequences come next with some dignity, instead of trying to manipulate your way out of them. That's the only path to forgiveness, if there is one." Victoria looked at me for a long time, seeing, perhaps for the first time, not the pliable, doting mother she had always known, but the woman who had just completely outmaneuvered her. A woman who was stronger than she could have ever imagined. "I deserve this, don't I?"
Yes, Victoria.
"You absolutely do. And you're going to have to learn to live with it." 3 days after Victoria's heartbreaking confession on my porch, Frederick's mother appeared at my door. Eleanor Monroe was everything I expected and so much more. Perfectly coiffed, dripping with tasteful jewelry, and radiating the kind of entitlement that only comes from 3 generations of inherited wealth. Her gaze was sharp, calculating. "Mrs. Summers, we need to discuss this situation rationally and discreetly. This is becoming quite damaging to our family's reputations." I invited her in, curious to see what version of reality the Monroe family had constructed to explain their son's federal criminal charges. Eleanor settled into my living room as if granting me an audience, her posture rigid and superior. "Frederick obviously made some unfortunate choices, that much is clear. But to pursue criminal charges seems rather vindictive, don't you think? It's not our style." "Vindictive? Your son helped orchestrate a plan to steal my inheritance and throw me out of my own house. What would you call it, Mrs. Monroe?" "I call it justice." Frederick was following Victoria's lead. He didn't understand the full situation. He's so young and naive in these matters. The woman was actually trying to blame my daughter for her son's criminal behavior.
"I had to admire the audacity."
The nerve was remarkable. "Mrs. Monroe, Frederick created forged legal documents. That's not following someone. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. It's a felony. And he knew exactly what he was doing. Frederick's attorney believes we can reach an amicable settlement that benefits everyone. You get your house back, Victoria faces appropriate consequences, and Frederick avoids the embarrassing publicity of a trial. It's for the best, for all involved." Appropriate consequences, as if Victoria's crime was a minor breach of etiquette, a small misstep. "What kind of settlement do you envision, Mrs. Monroe?" Eleanor smiled, smug, clearly believing she had found an opening in my resolve. "Frederick's family is prepared to compensate you for your inconvenience. Let's say $2 million, in exchange for dropping the charges against Frederick. It's a generous offer." $2 million, to forgive the man who helped steal $35 million from me. It wasn't just insulting, it was a mockery. Mrs. Monroe, your son was part of a scheme that would have cost me everything I owned. Do you think $2 million covers that? That's a joke. Mabel, be realistic. Frederick has a promising career, children, a reputation to uphold. Sending him to prison serves no one. It will destroy his future. It serves justice, Mrs. Monroe. And that is priceless. Eleanor's polished facade cracked slightly, her eyes flashing with anger. Justice? You're destroying multiple families over money you could never have managed anyway. You're just a housewife. There it was. The same condescending attitude that had poisoned my relationship with Victoria. The same arrogance that had made them both so blind. In their world, I was just the help who had risen up, a threat to their established order. Mrs. Monroe, I believe we're done here. There's nothing more to discuss. Mabel, please, reconsider. $5 million. That is my final offer. Take it, or you will regret this deeply.
$5 million to let Frederick walk free.
The amount was staggering, but the principle was non-negotiable. My answer is no, Mrs. Monroe. There will be no negotiation. Let justice take its course. Eleanor stood, her posture fully restored, an icy chill in her eyes. Very well, Mabel Summers. But you should know, Frederick's legal team has found some very interesting information about your husband's business practices. It would be most unfortunate if that were to become public during the trial. Most unfortunate indeed. The threat was clear, unmistakable. But I felt no fear, only a burning curiosity.
What kind of information, Mrs. Monroe?
Be specific. The kind that might make you reconsider who the real criminal was in this situation. Information that will cast your dear Robert in a very different light. After Eleanor left, I immediately called Mr. Schneider and relayed the conversation. Mabel, whatever they think they've found, it doesn't change the hard facts of Victoria and Frederick's crimes. This is pure intimidation. But could it affect the case, Mr. Schneider? Could they muddy the waters enough, cast doubt on Robert's character or business practices, sway a jury? I thought of Robert, of our marriage, of all the secrets that could be buried in 44 years of a life together. A deep uncertainty gnawed at me. Mr. Schneider, I want to know everything about Robert's business. Every deal, every partnership, every potential irregularity. I want the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Mabel, are you sure? Sometimes it's better to let the past lie. Some truths are better left unknown. The Monroe family is threatening to drag Robert's memory through the mud to protect their criminal son. I want to know the truth first, before they use it against me. I will not be caught unprepared. That evening, I sat in Robert's study, now my study, surrounded by his files and began to go through his records, systematically, methodically. Robert had been meticulously organized, every document dated and categorized. But as I dug deeper into his business dealings, I began to find things that didn't quite add up, things that gave me a sick feeling in my stomach. Payments to opaque shell companies, consulting fees that seemed exorbitant, partnerships with firms that seemed to exist only on paper. By midnight, I had uncovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about my husband, something that shattered my entire world. The private investigator Mr. Schneider had recommended was a sharp-eyed woman named Lillian Peterson, who specialized in financial crimes. She spent 6 intense hours in Robert's study, photographing every suspicious document and piecing together what she called the true picture of your husband's business empire. Her grave expression told me she had discovered something serious. Mrs. Summers, your husband was running a highly sophisticated money laundering operation through his consulting firm. We're talking millions of dollars in illicit transactions over the last decade. He was deeply entangled in criminal enterprises. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, leaving me completely stunned. That's impossible, Lillian. Robert was the most honest man I knew. He was a pillar of the community. I'm sorry, Mrs. Summers, but the evidence is overwhelming and conclusive. He was laundering money for organized crime, the Moreno family, and using his legitimate business as a front. A double life that no one suspected. I stared at the documents spread across Robert's desk. Invoices for services never rendered, consulting contracts with non-existent companies, payment schedules that corresponded with known criminal activities. A nightmare was becoming reality. How long had this been going on, Lillian? Based on these detailed records, at least 12 years, probably longer. It was a long-standing, secret network.
12 years.
While I was planning dinner parties and attending charity galas, my husband was facilitating criminal enterprises. Mrs. Summers, there's more, and this is a critical point. The $10 million Robert left to Victoria came directly from laundered funds. If the FBI discovers this, they will seize everything as proceeds of crime. Literally everything. The room began to spin. I felt dizzy.
Everything?
The house, the investments. All of it would be lost. Unless. Unless what, Lillian? Is there any hope? Lillian looked uncomfortable, her gaze shifting around the room. Unless Victoria and Frederick's legal team already knows about this and is planning to use it as leverage. If you inform the FBI about your husband's crimes, you might be able to negotiate immunity in exchange for cooperation. You could save yourself by putting your husband's body on the table, so to speak. My daughter and her husband weren't just thieves. They were holding a nuclear weapon over my head, a dirty bomb that would destroy everything. What are my options, Lillian? I need to know how to fight back. Legally, you could turn yourself in to the FBI, volunteer testimony, and hope for leniency. You would lose most of the money, but you might be able to keep the house. A portion of the assets would be seized for sure. And if I don't? Victoria and Frederick's lawyers will likely leak this information strategically. You'll lose everything anyway, but you could also face potential charges for unknowingly benefiting from criminal activities. It's a terrible scenario for you. I thought of Eleanor Monroe's smug confidence, her certainty that I would take her settlement offer. They had known about Robert's crimes all along and were using it as a weapon against me. Lillian, how did they find out about this? Who informed them?
Frederick's an investment banker.
He would have recognized the patterns in your husband's financial records, the irregularities. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? They have a strategy.
My phone rang.
Victoria's number. Mom, we need to meet tonight. There are things you need to know about Dad that change everything. It's very urgent. I already know, Victoria.
The längse on the other end.
Then you know what, Mom? Be specific. I know about the money laundering. I know about the criminal connections. I know that everything your father left us is tainted. And I know you're trying to use it against me. Mom, listen to me very carefully. Frederick's lawyers have been in contact with the FBI. They're willing to allow us to renegotiate our situation. For all of us.
What kind of Renegociation, Victoria?
What dirty deal have you cooked up? Frederick gets immunity in exchange for information about Dad's criminal network. You get to keep $5 million and the house. The rest goes to the government. And my and Frederick's charges. The fraud charges disappear. We all walk away from this mess, and then we can be a family again. It was brilliant, in a sociopathic way. Victoria had turned my moral victory into her strategic advantage. Victoria, you are asking me to help you profit from your crimes by leveraging Dad's crimes. You're worse than he was. I'm asking you to be practical, Mom. The alternative is losing everything and possibly facing charges yourself.
You don't have a quase.
I looked around Robert's study, seeing it clearly for the first time. The expensive furniture, the rare books, the exquisite art collection, all bought with blood money.
I need time to think, Victoria. This is too much, all at once.
Mom, the FBI meeting is tomorrow morning. Frederick's lawyer needs a definitive answer tonight. Time is running out. After I hung up, I sat in the oppressive darkness of Robert's study, surrounded by the crushing evidence of his double life. 44 years of marriage to a stranger, an illusion. A daughter who had inherited more than just money from her father. She had inherited his talent for deception, his cold-bloodedness. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated who I was when my back was against the wall. She had underestimated the quiet strength that lay dormant inside me. I picked up the phone and dialed Lillian Peterson. Lillian, how fast can you get me a meeting with the FBI? I have a story to tell, and I think they'll find it very interesting. A story that is not the one Victoria is going to tell. FBI agent Hannah Steiner looked exactly how you'd imagine a federal investigator. Serious, intelligent, and completely immune to charm or manipulation. She sat across from me in Mr. Schneider's conference room, recording our conversation with unwavering professionalism and taking notes with mechanical precision. Her presence radiated a calm authority. Mrs. Summers, you understand that by coming forward voluntarily, you are potentially admitting to benefiting from the proceeds of crime. This is a serious matter. I understand, Agent Steiner. But I'd rather tell you the full truth than let my daughter and her husband manipulate this situation for their own gain.
I have nothing to hide.
I laid it all out. Robert's hidden criminal enterprise, Victoria's cold-blooded fraud, Frederick's forged documents, and the brazen extortion attempt disguised as a settlement offer. Every detail, every lie, was exposed. My daughter thinks she can trade information on her father's crimes for immunity from her own charges, and she's using me as a pawn. That's exactly what she believes, Agent Steiner. And she thinks I'll cooperate because I'm afraid of losing everything. But she doesn't really know me. Agent Steiner smiled for the first time, a small, almost imperceptible twitch of her lips. Are you afraid, Mrs. Summers? Under the circumstances, it would be understandable. Agent Steiner, 2 weeks ago I was a grieving widow sleeping in a cheap motel with no home. Today, I'm sitting here, willingly confessing my late husband's criminal enterprise to federal agents. Fear is no longer my primary emotion. I've left it behind. What is, then, Mrs. Summers? What's driving you? Anger, Agent Steiner. Pure, crystallized anger at being manipulated by people who have underestimated my intelligence for decades. Anger at the injustice. Agent Steiner's smile widened, her eyes glinting. Mrs. Summers, would you be willing to wear a wire? We could trap your daughter and son-in-law tonight. 3 hours later, I sat in my living room, a small, inconspicuous recording device taped to my chest. My heart hammered with a mixture of nerves and resolve. I was waiting for Victoria and Frederick to arrive for what they thought was a surrender meeting, where I would submit to their terms. They knocked at 8 p.m. sharp, both dressed as if attending an important business dinner. Frederick carried a heavy briefcase, likely containing immunity agreements and settlement documents, ready to seal his triumph. Mom, you look better than you have in weeks, Victoria said, kissing my cheek as if nothing had happened. Her false affection was nauseating.
I feel better, Victoria.
Clarity has that effect. The truth has set me free. Frederick opened his briefcase with the efficiency of a man who had handled similar dirty negotiations before. Mabel, our lawyers have structured this very favorably for you. You keep the house, $5 million in clean assets, and full immunity from any charges related to Robert's activities. It's more than you could have expected. Clean assets. That's an interesting phrase, Frederick. A euphemism, to be precise.
Victoria schott Frederick a Warning, troublet glance.
Her composure was starting to fray. Mom, the important thing is that we're all protected. The past stays buried, and we all move forward. There's no need to do any more damage here. What about the $35 million Robert actually left me? It wasn't all from criminal activity, was it? Mom, that money is tainted. It can't be separated from Dad's criminal activities. Taking $5 million is the best possible outcome we could get for you. And you too, what do you get out of this deal?
What's your piece of the pie?
Frederick leaned forward, his confidence returning, an arrogant smirk on his lips. We get to put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us.
Victoria's charges disappear.
My reputation remains intact, and our family can heal. We all come out winners.
Misunderstanding.
He was still calling fraud and extortion a misunderstanding.
Frederick, help ML Understand zur Meeting.
When exactly did you discover Robert's criminal activities? Were you in on it from the beginning?
What do you mean, Mabel?
Those questions are irrelevant. I mean, did you know about the money laundering when you married Victoria? Or did you only discover it recently when you decided to steal my inheritance? Were you part of the plan, or are you just an opportunistic crook? Frederick and Victoria exchanged panicked glances, their faces turning chalk white. Mabel, I don't think that's relevant to our current discussion. Let's stay on topic. Actually, I think it's very relevant. Because if you knew about Robert's crimes and said nothing, that makes you an accessory after the fact. And if you only discovered them while committing your own crimes, that makes you remarkably unlucky and remarkably criminal. Victoria's composure shattered completely. Mom, what are you getting at? What game are you playing? I'm getting at the fact that you two have been planning this for months, possibly years. The forged will, the discovery of the money laundering, even Frederick's connections to document forgers. None of this was spontaneous. This was a cold, calculated plan. That's ridiculous, Mom. That's a conspiracy theory. Is it? Agent Steiner thinks it's quite plausible and has gathered enough evidence to prove it. The color drained from both their faces. Their eyes widened in shock.
Agent Steiner.
Frederick whispered, his voice barely audible. FBI. She was very interested in my story about systematic elder abuse, fraud, and extortion. Especially the part where you tried to blackmail me with my late husband's crimes. You shot yourselves in the foot. Frederick stood up abruptly, reaching for his briefcase, his movements frantic and desperate. Mabel, this conversation is over. Actually, Frederick, I think it's just beginning. Agent Steiner and two other federal agents entered my living room as Victoria and Frederick sat frozen in place, trapped in their own snare. The briefcase Frederick had reached for was immediately confiscated, along with both their phones. Victoria Summers Monroe and Frederick Monroe, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Victoria turned to me, an expression of absolute betrayal on her face, her eyes welling with tears. Mom, how could you do this to your own family?
I'm your Daughter.
The same way you could forge legal documents and steal my inheritance, darling. Except my way is legal and just. As the agents cuffed them, Frederick tried one last, desperate gambit. Mabel, you don't understand what you've done. There are people connected to Robert's business who will not appreciate this federal attention. You've put yourself in great danger. You're not safe. Agent Steiner paused her reading of their rights. Mr. Monroe, are you threatening a federal witness? That's another charge. I'm warning her about the reality of her situation. She has no idea who she's messing with. The reality, Agent Steiner said with calm finality, is that you just added witness tampering to your charges. A very unwise move. After they were led away, Agent Steiner sat down across from me again. Her expression was serious, but a hint of respect was in her eyes. Mrs. Summers, Frederick's warning may not be entirely baseless. Your husband was connected to some very dangerous people. People who will stop at nothing. How dangerous, Agent Steiner? Be direct.
I'm ready for the truth.
Mainly the Moreno family, a notorious organized crime syndicate. They've been using legitimate businesses for money laundering for decades. Your husband's consulting firm was one of their most successful operations. They were very successful and very violent. The name meant nothing to me, but the agent's grave expression told me everything I needed to know. Are you saying I'm in actual physical danger? Do I need to fear for my life? Potentially. But there's something else you should know about your husband's operation. Something that changes everything and gives you a new perspective. Agent Steiner pulled out a thick file, the kind that suggested months, even years of investigation. Mrs. Summers, your husband wasn't just laundering money for the Moreno family. He was an undercover FBI informant. For 12 years, he provided invaluable intelligence on their operations while pretending to facilitate their money laundering. An incredibly risky and courageous double life. The world tilted on its axis, my jaw dropping. Robert worked for the FBI?
Undercover.
A long-term investigation. The operation was so sensitive that even local FBI officers weren't informed, to protect his cover. Your husband helped us build cases against several major crime families, saving countless lives in the process. But the money was real. The millions he left me. The FBI allowed him to keep a percentage of the laundered funds as payment for his cooperation and to maintain his cover. Everything he left you was earned through legitimate cooperation with the federal government. It's absolutely clean, Mrs. Summers. I stared at her, trying to process this incredible revelation that redrew my entire picture of Robert. So the $35 million is legally mine? And untainted. Your husband died before the investigation was complete, but his 12 years of cooperation led directly to 47 arrests and the seizure of over $200 million in criminal assets. He was a hero. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why was I left in the dark? Because the investigation was still ongoing, and because we were unsure of your involvement or knowledge. Your daughter and son-in-law's fraud scheme actually helped us confirm your innocence. Victoria and Frederick knew nothing about this. They suspected criminal activity but had no idea about the federal cooperation. They were planning to blackmail you with information that would have actually exonerated your husband. Their own greed betrayed them. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic, a divine justice. Victoria had tried to steal my inheritance twice, once through fraud and once through extortion based on incomplete information. Her greed had made her doubly blind. Agent Steiner, what happens now? What's the next step? Now, you get your money back, Mrs. Summers. Your daughter and son-in-law face federal charges, and you get to decide what kind of life you want to build with your legitimate inheritance. A life of freedom and security. And the danger Frederick mentioned? The Moreno family. The Moreno family will be too busy with their own legal troubles to worry about you. We're executing search warrants in 3 states tomorrow morning that will dismantle their entire network. I looked around my living room, seeing it again as the site of my resurrection, my rebirth, rather than my humiliation. Agent Steiner, may I ask you something personal before you go? Of course, Mrs. Summers. Ask away. In your professional opinion, am I a terrible person for feeling satisfaction at Victoria's arrest? Is that unethical? Agent Steiner smiled, a warm, genuine smile. Mrs. Summers, in my professional opinion, you are a woman who refused to be a victim. A woman who stood up for herself. That's not terrible. That's inspiring and brave. You've taught everyone a lesson. 6 months later, I stood in the light-filled kitchen of my renovated house, brewing coffee for 2. The morning sun streamed through new floor-to-ceiling windows that actually opened, illuminating sleek countertops I had chosen myself for the first time in 44 years. It was my domain, by my rules. Good morning, Mabel. Sarah Peterson, Lillian's sister and my new financial advisor, appeared in the doorway, a thick binder of impressive investment reports in her hand. Good morning, Sarah. Ready for our quarterly review? The numbers speak for themselves, don't they? The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of court proceedings, media interviews, and a profound personal transformation. Victoria and Frederick were each serving 18-month federal sentences, a just punishment for their greed and betrayal. The extensive media coverage of their crimes had turned me into something of a celebrity in elder advocacy circles. Your portfolio is performing beautifully, Sarah said, sitting at my new breakfast nook, which had become the center of many productive conversations. The Mabel Summers Foundation for Elder Protection is fully operational, and the Scholarship Fund has already selected its first worthy recipients. You've really done something amazing. The foundation had become my primary focus. Using $15 million of my inheritance, we were funding legal aid for seniors facing familial financial abuse and backing legislative changes to strengthen elder protection laws. It was my way of making the world a slightly better place. Any news on the documentary, Sarah? Netflix has confirmed the production deal. They want to start filming next month. Your story has generated tremendous interest. My story had captured media attention far beyond the initial news cycle. Mother's Revenge, an American crime story, was being developed as a limited series, with proceeds going to elder advocacy organizations. A wonderful irony. And Victoria? Any more letters from prison? Sarah's expression turned cautious, almost compassionate. She wrote again. Her lawyer says she wants to apologize and ask for forgiveness. She seems genuinely remorseful. Victoria had written me 17 letters from federal prison. I had read the first few, which ranged from self-righteous to desperate, before deciding not to open them anymore. Some relationships, once broken, cannot be repaired with words. The scars were too deep. Sarah, has my position on that changed?
Have I changed my mind?
Not according to our previous conversations, Mabel. But people evolve. Even people who made terrible choices can change. I thought of the woman I had been 6 months ago, grieving, dependent, willing to accept the meager scraps of dignity my family offered me. That woman might have felt obligated to forgive Victoria, to rebuild a relationship based on guilt and tradition. But that woman was gone. She had perished in the flames of transformation. Sarah set up a meeting with Victoria's lawyer. Not to reconcile, but to clarify something very important. What is it, Mabel? What do you want her to be told? I want Victoria to understand that her actions had consequences beyond legal punishment. I want her to know that she permanently destroyed our relationship and that her children will grow up knowing why their mother went to prison. That is a lesson she needs to learn. That seems harsh, Mabel. Are you sure you want to be so unforgiving? Good. It's supposed to be harsh. Victoria made adult choices that hurt people she was supposed to love. She doesn't get to escape the emotional consequences just because she wrote a few prison letters. Some things are unforgivable. Sarah made a brisk note in her leather-bound portfolio. And the grandchildren, Mabel? Victoria has requested supervised visits with them.
What about you?
My relationship with Victoria's children will be based on their choices when they are old enough to understand the truth, not on their mother's rehabilitation efforts. They will get to make their own choice when they're ready.
The doorbell rang.
Through the window, I saw a delivery truck with a large package. Must be the new furnishings for the art studio, I said to Sarah. The art studio had been my favorite renovation project. Robert's former study was now a bright, airy space where I was rediscovering my love for painting, something I had abandoned when I married and took on the role of supportive wife and mother. It was a reclamation of myself.
Mabel, may I ask you some meeting personal before I go?
Of course, Sarah.
Ask anything you like.
Do you ever regret any of how this played out?
The prison sentences, the media attention, the permanent family estrangement?
Was it worth it? I considered the question as I accepted my delivery and signed for it. 6 months ago, I had been invisible. A widow without money, without a home, without prospects. Today, I was a multimillionaire philanthropist with a thriving foundation, a documentary deal, and a sense of purpose that went far beyond my own survival. Sarah, my daughter, tried to steal everything I owned and make me homeless. My son-in-law created forged documents and threatened me with extortion. They showed me exactly who they were when they thought I was powerless to stop them. But they're still family, Mabel. Can you really write that off? No, they're still DNA, Sarah. Family are the people who protect you when you're vulnerable, who support and love you. Not the people who exploit your vulnerability for profit. That's the difference. Sarah closed her portfolio, satisfied with my answer, and nodded in acknowledgement. Besides, I added with a smile, look what I became when I stopped letting them define my worth and started walking my own path. After Sarah left, I walked slowly, deliberately through my house. Truly my house now, decorated to the last detail according to my tastes, organized by my priorities, a reflection of my soul. In the art studio, I unveiled my latest painting, a self-portrait of a woman standing in bright sunlight, her face turned toward the future, full of hope and resolve. The woman in the painting looked nothing at all like the grieving, broken widow who had packed her life into 2 suitcases 6 months ago. This woman looked strong, independent, fearless. She looked like someone who had learned that the best revenge is not to get even, but to become everything your enemies never thought you could be. Outside, the sun was slowly setting behind the majestic trees that I myself had planted in soil that belonged to me, on a property I had defended with intelligence and courage, rather than inherited by marriage or birth. Tomorrow, I would continue building the life I had chosen, the one I had made for myself, instead of the one others had planned for me. And if Victoria wanted to rebuild a relationship with this woman I now was, she would have to bring much more than empty prison letters and hollow apologies. She would have to bring a complete transformation, one that matched my own, a genuine repentance. Thank you for listening, my dears. Don't forget to subscribe, and please, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.